Welcome, welcome, everybody. Feel free to utilize that chat feature. You are all now Zoom experts. I feel like we all are, even if we didn't want to be, we now are. Feel free to share where you're coming from. We've got someone from Boulder. Hello, Boulder, Colorado. I am in Columbus, Ohio. Our readers are welcome to unmute, but those who are just guests are going to be muted until the Q&A portion of the reading. NYC in the house. I don't know if New York likes to be called NYC, but maybe. Alina, you probably have a say. Does New York like to be called NYC?
I truly don't know.
You know, because Philly loves being called Philly.
Yeah, that's the official name of our city.
Yeah,
I don't know what Philadelphia is. I've never heard of her.
Right, but San Fran's all touchy about being San Fran.
You can't call it Frisco. I feel like they get mad at
Yeah, they get really touchy. I feel like they like the airport, SFO. Who else likes being referred to by their airport? All right, we got Chevy Chase, David in Granville. Yes, welcome. So good to see you, David. So great to see so many of my students here. Welcome. Denison in the house. David Baker's in the house. I'm seeing a lot of Denison students in the house. I'm very excited by this. They're like, it's not enough to see you in class, Professor Dasbach. We are coming virtually, partially because there's incentives, but you didn't hear it from me. We are going to get started in about 3 minutes. For poets, 5 minutes after start time is like early. I feel like Zoom has made us all more punctual, don't y'all think? It's really, because poetry readings usually start what, 30 minutes late or more? Just keeping an eye on the waiting room as it keeps growing and growing. If you prefer to turn your captions on, this is so wonderful. I had no idea it was a thing, but you can turn on your captions. More coming in. Just a question for the chat in case, it comes to mind. What's a favorite love poem of yours, or perhaps love song? We're gonna hear many poems that circle around the theme, but if you've got one to share. Hello from Baltimore. Oh, Maryland. So many, a couple from Maryland, my hometown. Well, my American hometown. More Denison students rolling in. Welcome, welcome. All right. I'm not seeing love poems. Are you thinking deeply about which love poem to share in the chat? Ooh. Oh, that's a good one. Robert Creeley's always a good one. So pithy. Oh, John Prine's final song. As soon as you say killing me, I just hear killing me softly in my head. It just comes right in there. All right, friends, about 1 more minute and we will get going. Oh, I was just listening to Elton John, Kate. It's just always. And my first introduction to your song was through Moulin Rouge, which is, I know, a bit shameful that was my first introduction to your song. But Ewan does it so well, too, in that movie. Oh, yes, Katie's poem is fantastic. That whole book is fantastic. Oh, Queen, always. Melina, you're so right. Queen, every song of Queen is pure love. There we go. So many good song ideas in the chat. All right, friends, we are going to get started. I am going to keep an eye on the waiting room and keep letting people in. I'm going to strangely spotlight myself, which is a bizarre thing to do, but that's what's going to happen. There we go. And we are going to get started. I am beyond delighted to be here to, sorry, bedtime. Beyond delighted to be here to introduce this incredible reading for you. Words Together, Worlds Apart has been on a long hiatus and is now back fittingly on the theme of love, which in some form or another brings us all to the page, to poetry, and to each other. When in 2020, nearly 3 years ago, which feels like a lifetime, and somehow at once yesterday, all in-person events got canceled. I wanted to find a way for us to stay connected to each other's work, and not only to hear each other's work, but to engage in a dialogue about craft, obsession, process, and whatever else our writing was going through at the moment. So I reached out to some of my favorite poets and asked them to be a part of this reading series, and it was born out of the pandemic, which hasn't left us, but this reading series is meant to endure beyond it, to maintain and build our community through our shared love of words. In 2020, we held 11 readings and had more than 50 poets from across the country and even a few from abroad. And then in 2021, we held 13 readings with 80 poets from across the country and some from abroad. And then in 2022, we only had 1 reading, but it was huge. It was a few days after the Russian invasion of Ukraine, and we had 20 poets and translators from Ukraine, from the United States, and 800 people live with us and raising thousands of dollars. So it was pretty incredible. And I'm so excited that we can be back together now, and sponsored with great support from Denison University. So thank you so much to my new home institution where I'm delighted to be. Each reading has helped me feel more connected to the writing community, to other poets, and the poets have challenged me, have made me see things in a new light, and I hope they will do so for you as well. So before we get to the main event, let me tell you what's coming in a few months. On October 25th, same time, same place, we will be getting into the spooky season with the theme of haunting, with Ananda Lima, Jessica Q. Stark, Rajiv Mohabir, and Maya Zeller. And I will put those links into the chat so you can already register for the next reading. And then on November 29th, just after Thanksgiving and before the rest of the holiday chaos, we will have a reading on the theme of family with Oliver de la Paz, Jared Harrell, Irene Mathieu, and Chen Chen. And if you have a book coming out and would like to be considered for a reading, I will put the email to reach out to me in the chat as well. Please follow the reading series on all the socials. I'll put that in there for you too. And now to the main event. It is commonly accepted that there are 4 categories of love. And while I hate such restrictions on the boundlessness that is love, bear with me. They are sometimes known by the 4 Greek words for love: storge, or affection, philia, or friendship, eros, or passion, and agape, or selfless love. Poets write across these loves, into them, away from them, and beyond them. With each reading, we've been giving prompts based on the reading's theme. So here is your prompt if you choose to accept it. Think about your own writing. Which kind of love do you turn to in poems? What do you gravitate towards? I, for one, mostly wrestle with storge, love for family, occasionally eros or agape, but philia, friendship, or brotherly and sisterly love is sometimes rare in my work, maybe because I'm an only child. So I challenge you to write the kind of love that you usually stray from on the page, one that may scare you or be more foreign. Begin by making a list of objects that remind you of such love, perhaps a list of places too, all the while keeping the word love outside of the poem. In fact, show this kind of love without ever naming it. And as is tradition, I'll begin with a short poem of my own on the theme, where maybe I try this kind of love without naming it. And it's from my first book, Many Names for Mother. Dядя Вода, my son calls any body of water, man, Mr. Uncle Water, Uncle Sea, Uncle Ocean, Dядя, not father, but close. We didn't teach him this, kinship, nature flowing into family, vast expanse into what is already inside him. Обними дядю вода, he says, and wraps his arms around the waves. Hug Uncle Water, and he falls flat onto the sand, palms wide and sinking as though into my body. Your kid is beautiful, a passerby says. Have more, a whole litter, and if you have them close together. His cheek is in the sand, mouth full of salt. What's one more, she says. Everything, I think, and want to hold him, but he is water, and no matter how wide I stretch my arms, I cannot hug or count, cannot contain the whole of him. So thank you for bearing with my introduction, and now to the main event, to our amazing readers who are going to read in alphabetical order. And we're going to begin with Jamaica Baldwin, who is a poet and educator from Santa Cruz, California. Her debut poetry collection, Bone Language, was published by Yes Yes Books, woohoo, pressmate, love Yes Yes, in June of 2023. She is currently an assistant professor at Ithaca College in New York, and you can find her work online. I will show you where. In the chat, I'll also show you where you can purchase Jamaica's book. And now, without further ado, Jamaica.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much, Julia, for the invitation and for just creating this virtual space for love. I attended that epic Words Together, Worlds Apart that you mentioned in your intro with the 800 other people, and I will never forget that experience. So I'm just so grateful that you've kept this going. When I was thinking about tonight's theme and trying to decide what to read, I realized that most of Bone Language, my book, is about love in one way or another. You know, it's about myth making or myth undoing or reimagining as acts of forgiveness and gratitude, which I believe are forms of love. So I'm going to begin with a poem that's actually not in the book. And it's about a conversation that I had with my mother and talking about obsessions. I often write about this relationship. About 6 or 7 years ago. It's about being present, you know, for another person, witnessing their pain, sharing in their grief, and how that simple act can be so illuminating and healing in powerful ways. It's called The Conversation. As I sat with my mom on the couch, she said she had something to tell me that might put my rage in perspective. I could feel the wind of her deep sighs as she mustered the courage to speak. Something speech never demanded of my mother until now. Until now, words had always been her neon sky, her revolution of possibility, her weapon and her feast. But there she sat, my mom, chewing on air as the house folded around us, as the secret she'd kept for 40 years became the wolf in every room we ever shared, the wolf whose howl was a redemption I never knew I needed. When the air couldn't get any thicker, she uncaged her voice, and I became lost in its architecture of kept secrets. Her body had a history. It was time I knew her pulled open shadows were more than the absence of light. Her archipelago of melancholy was more than a chemical imbalance. We held each other that day, both of us in tears, the wounds of us filling the room. This is how it begins, I thought. 2 generations of women refusing silence and shame, necks stretched towards the moon, mouths opening wide. So this next poem is a short poem that I wrote. I mean, it's not that short, but I was diagnosed with breast cancer in 2013, and I was grappling with the impact of that trauma, you know, that experience forever shifted my relationship to my body, to the relevance of happiness as an achievable and sustainable ideal, and also my relationship to others who are still walking alongside their trauma. And it's called The End of Sorrow is Not Happiness. I've gained many things since cancer: poetry, extra weight, a distrust of happiness, the way this country names it a pursuit, a destination most are never meant to reach. No matter how many shovels we break digging, there is always more earth, more history, more heft required to fail. Even if I could make my way through their labyrinth of promises without coming undone, I'm not sure I'd want to give up my sorrows. All my reckless patience wandering through untamed hallways. I've grown accustomed to their defiance, to the melancholy of women unbolting private alienations. I prefer this fracture of a home we built together, without borders, without hustle. And the birds pay us no mind here, nor the trees, nor moss. So much endless, brilliant moss. The next poem I'm going to share is very, very short, and it is actually titled Love. Love, if not the word, then the stillness. Let us linger here a while. If not the song, then the brushstroke. Gentle, I am tender-headed. This is how to love me, with your hand holding the pain off at the root. Sorry, not used to reading from my book. It's very exciting, but also a tad confusing. Okay, and this next poem, I probably read at most of my readings, at least since I've written it, and it's about my father. And it's a poem I've tried to write since he passed away in 2015, but I didn't really succeed until about 2020. And I wanted to paint an honest portrait of him, but without all the disappointment and bitterness that usually found its way into my writing about him. I wanted to imagine who he could have been without all the stuff, without the racism and the alcoholism and the poverty and all of that stuff. I wanted to give him a future, and that was sort of my love to him, Father Weaver. If he wasn't janitor, he'd be gravel artist. He'd be glitter farmer. He'd groove skate down Beach Hill to Isley Brothers. If he wasn't janitor, he'd be tennis racketeer, ocean tamer, cicada sequencer. He'd turn his knit cap upside down to catch fireflies, load them into pitching machine, point upwards and shoot stars into sky. If he hadn't been liquor undertaker, booze regulator, drunk gambling wish denier, he might have been daughter wrangler, fear whisperer, sweet lullaby impersonator. His underwater voice might have sung me to float and swell. If he hadn't been vodka foreman, he might have used strands of daughter hair to draw maps of blackness onto his back. I might have watched them stretch and curve and maze him into father quest, into secret daughter mission. I'd pack a flashlight and meals for the trip. I'd stretch and nimble get. I'd compass take, whistle, and song and song. I'd path follow and lost get, and around turn, till I center reach and undead him. And I'm going to end with this final poem about my mother, and it's just called Portrait of a Mother with Hawken House. Thank you for having me. Mother never decorated the house or planted a garden, never placed the palm of her hand against the cool surface of house, never said this we'll call home, never committed to being present, fixed, immovable, never rooted herself in space and time, never stayed but never left. Instead, floated like an apparition through memory and stardust, recited stories of blackouts, bruises, and bad decisions, told them with grin and cackle, how she preferred brutal to boring, how she cursed with all her bones, how she demurred only insofar as it got her closer to free, how she gnashed her teeth when shushed or told to quiet, how she dangled her rage towards men in front of a daughter still dreaming of princes, how there is not a hawk in the sky she won't point out, not a willow branch she won't reach for, a melody she won't sway to, an otter she won't meet at water's edge. There is love, and there is love, and there is love, and I prefer the latter. This is how I take after her, unwilling to become any small, watered down thing. Thank you.
Incredible. Thank you so much for that gorgeous reading. How much love. Speechless. Thank you so much, Jamaica. Next, we have Matthew Olzmann, who is the author of Constellation Route, as well as 2 previous poetry collections. His poems have appeared in the New York Times, Best American Poetry, the Pushcart Prize Anthology, Kenyon Review, and elsewhere. He is assistant professor at Dartmouth College and teaches in the MFA program for writers at Warren Wilson. I will post a link for how you can get his stunning book from Alice James, and cannot wait to hear Matthew read.
Hi, it's great to be here and to see the names of so many pals on my screen. Getaway driver. In the movies, the getaway driver wears sunglasses. He's patient while waiting, staring through the windshield as if bored by all this tension, never a bead of sweat, never a nervous glance in the rearview mirror. Here come his conspirators, scampering from the crime scene, diving into the car's open windows. Here's the cash ripped from the vault or the briefcase of black opals. Watch how he shoots the car through oncoming traffic, careens down every narrow alley. See how skillfully he leaps a guardrail, crashes through any well-placed roadblock, and never flinches in the flare of some cinematic gunfire. When I'm behind the wheel, I'm not nearly so confident. I'm afraid of basically everything. I'm always ready to step away from the vehicle with my hands raised, but not this time. I've learned to appreciate how quickly the smoke can clear. When I wake up, you are always dancing or laughing in the next room. Look at the books on our shelves, bread on the table, sangria over ice, your hand resting in mine. On every greatest heists of all time list, you can always find the theft of the Scream, the fire from Mount Olympus, and all those shimmery Antwerp diamonds. But I'll hold this life with you up there against any of them. To keep what's been stolen, I'm ready to outrace every law that looks for me. The sirens could be closing in. The credits might be about to roll, but the tank is forever full, the engine always running. Cartography. We sent our explorers into the realm of human feeling to map its frontiers. One by one, each was lost to us, drowned at sea, mauled by bears, enchanted by fairies in the beguiling glen. Only one returned, bedraggled, unable to speak, couldn't say what happened, kept trying to go back. I'm going to read a couple of wedding poems, or maybe just one wedding poem. This is an epithalamium that refuses to ignore the possibility of a zombie apocalypse. Let's be honest. What each of us wants is to never get eaten by zombies. And the shotgun-shaped truth of the matter is we're less likely to be ravaged by the ravenous appetites of the dead if someone just loves us. We each need a partner posted on the roof, someone with a crossbow watching the high cornfields for signs of movement. There needs to be someone willing to brave the basement during the power outage, someone to descend the midnight staircase to repair the generator. We need a reserve supply of bandages, fragmentation grenades, and flamethrowers, just in case the grid goes down. I'm afraid of dying alone, and I imagine that I'm not alone in that fear. Those of us who've known sorrow know the world is populated by those who will respond to our outstretched arms by eating our outstretched arms. The God-honest miracle we celebrate today is these gentle and soon-to-be betrothed friends of ours have found in each other a companion willing to declare in public, I promise to never eat your extremities, kidneys, or brains. And furthermore, I vow to protect you from those who would. We call this commitment marriage, and there is no greater honor than to say, even when humanity withers around us, I will guard the humanity that stirs, restless and delicate like a fawn in a field of trillium in you. If the lights of the city go dark, if the highways fall silent, if every radio fills with static, if you are surrounded by a flesh-eating foulness and running low on ammo, I will love you like an unmarked helicopter flying in from the horizon. I will hover over you, and with my machine gunners struggling to hold the danger back, I will lower the rope ladder to meet you. I'm going to read two more poems. Whenever I got too many peaceful nights of sleep, whenever the vice grip of anxiety failed to apply the proper pressure to my skull, I could type image of a brown recluse spider bite, or how much of Antarctica has already melted, into a search engine and let that network of teeth take care of the rest. Whenever the season was too bright, whenever my table was too bountiful, I could count on this trusty nightmare machine to produce a door in the sky or earth and release one hairless wolf starving and strange to hunt me down, tear off one of my arms, whisper something like, Ron DeSantis could be your next president, and immediately my nerves would light up with catastrophe and inescapability. But it doesn't work like that anymore. Technology has evolved. The sophistication of my dread has evolved. Today, the best nightmare machines understand the fundamental necessity of delight, the importance of good fortune. They now try to make you cherish, at least a little, the world before they introduce its demise. So now they send photographs of only my favorite days. You and I walking through the rain in Vancouver. You and I listening to that folk singer at Salvador Deli in Hamtramck. You and I at Avalon Bakery with only $3 and a blueberry muffin to share. And only now does my life end a little when I hear the outcry of a car slamming its brakes. When you go in for a routine checkup, only now do I pace the living room until you return. This is the best nightmare machine's most delicate victory, allowing me to revel in every moment together, every sip of this mulled cider, every bite of this pear, the dishes stacked precariously in the sink. I'll get to those tomorrow, I swear, but even those remind me of previous joys, the way they pile up, their awkward leaning, their threat to fall. Letter written while waiting in line at Comic-Con. Klingon, Parseltongue, Na'vi. People invent imaginary languages so imaginary citizens of imaginary worlds can speak to one another. Elvish, Ewokese, Dothraki. You can learn these languages, come to a convention with your face painted blue or a leather scabbard bolted to your back and talk to people who will understand you. I understand what language feels like when you're not understood. More than once, I thought some other planet might be my home. Like last week in an alley, I saw one man punch another man until neither looked like a person. There are hundreds of reasons like this to yearn to be from some other galaxy, century, or dimension, reasons to put on a spacesuit or wizard's cloak and hope no one will recognize you. But it's not the costumes that amaze me. It's always been the languages, the way they reach for something that can't be said in our tongue. In the only language I know, there are not enough words for parabola or isotope, too few phrases to say I'm sorry or I'm glad that I found you. Though we've been married for years, I wish we met when we were children. If we had known each other in the year you spent alone on Earth without one friend, we could have been aliens together. I'd have those green four-fingered hands, you with your glow-in-the-dark antennae, words in the form of strange whirling noises, low chirping machine music, wisps of static, lamentations of rain. Only you and I would know what these sounds meant. Thank you all.
Thank you so much for teaching us how to write love poems that make you laugh and cry simultaneously. Incredible. And because I was so excited, I couldn't even, follow the alphabet because Kay, you were supposed to be next, but I don't know the alphabet. So Kay Iver is a non-binary trans poet born in Mississippi. Their book short film starring My Beloved's Red Bronco won the Ballard Spar Prize in Poetry selected by Tahimba Jess. Their poems have appeared in the Boston Review, Kenyon Review, Tri-Quarterly, and elsewhere. I will tell you exactly how to purchase their book through Milkweed, and I cannot wait to hear from it.
Thank you, Julia. That was so great. I have just a Shinto already in my brain of all the great lines I've inserted that have to do with love. And now I want to write one when the reading's over. I just love the energy here. Yeah. Okay. This is my book, short film starring My Beloved's Red Bronco. It was just released in January. And it's a book about coming of age as queer in Mississippi in the 90s. And many of the poems pay loving tribute to my first love, who was trans, who I met when I was 14 and I knew for 11 years until he died when I was 25 and he was 26. I'll read 2 poems from this book and 2 new poems about love and desire. For Missy, who never got his new name. I hear the stars are sentient, which gives me hope for the nitrogen feeding your grass. Even more for the mole ending the day's burrow in your skull. I'm told your atoms are still atoms. Somewhere you're sitting by a pool, picking apart the physics of swimming. In the hallway of a large high school in Mississippi, you're again the sophomore, guarding my classroom entrance with a letter like an undiscovered prince. I've resumed my surprise at desire I thought was for cave dwellers. This is where I go wrong. I loved a body you didn't. My younger self wants the word to rebuild rather than stop at the blonde hair, middle part, low ponytail, the impressive manliness with which your hips carried utility denim. I tell my young self to flatten her memory's landscape. Picture 2 scars liberating a torso, a first name that doesn't hiss. Soon, a Brooklyn apartment. We pretend it finally happened for you. It really did. And this one's called Because You Can't. Because you can't, I stand in front of paintings a long time, and think about the bones once belonging to you and how Egon Shola could line a body into movement. Because you no longer have a shape, I've made a practice of nearness. A hawk lets me stroke her mid-flight. I let comets land in my mouth when they're small enough. My lover pushes all their weight on me because I ask. They flatten me into astonishment. Because nothing can astonish you, I tempt what's alive by doubting I could love it more. It's a neat trick. When I use it, raccoons visit often, their fingers closed around mud older than you. Missy, this is me moving on. There's a noon rain to get caught in and many clavicles to behold. I wish you could see this one, tilting across a century. I write a lot about erotic love, and for that book, I would say it's erotic love that has turned into agape love. Like the beloved in that poem has very much become a queer ancestor and higher power for me, or the memory of him at least. And I'm working on 2 books right now about queer desire, one a book of essays, and I keep thinking that T for T love, which the queers call trans for trans, is its own kind of category. I think in both erotic and in friendship, I've learned it's just a very kind of tender kind, and I'm still putting language to that, and I don't have a lot of language for it. I keep reading some of my favorite authors about it, but right now it's very much a zygote of a project. This one's called Central Park. Inside my lover's mouth, I taste what I can't touch, the Octobering of sycamores, the boulder tourists stand on for selfies, the choreography of kites. This is where desire begins, this pulse from lip to throat. I want you means my mouth wakes me up, asking to close around you. Psychologists say oral fixation points to adult addiction. My addiction to lovers made adulthood possible. Loneliness will absolutely rot away teeth. My mouth has always known the stakes. In our hotel room, my lover leans over me, says, "Open your mouth," before he spits. The deep P sound of his lips, another command. Inside my cheeks, the first complete echo. My lover prods my lips down and sideways like a dentist. He tongues the surface of every tooth. He opens his vulva above my face, says, "Suck, softly." I can't, not softly. And some more agape plus eros. This is called God with a comma, lowercase God with a comma. I thought my lover was you. With injections and surgical scars, he welded a gender I envied. I prayed nightly to his plush mouth, believing it had built me. It answered in commands. Leave this pen in your teeth. Press your cervix against mine. I've never eaten a word so willingly, never tongued a wafer so eager for the next. My lover chased me across states like I thought you would. In a bedroom lit by a hallway, he tied my wrists to my ankles and gave me the lashes I wanted because he wanted. I said, "Do you feel powerful?" He said between hits, "I am." God, were you watching? Could you see what bright streaks worship can make? How gracefully the worshipped can flee a room, flee a body he had just flattened into walls, called beloved. I haven't touched myself since. What a miracle, this wait. I waited for you exactly this way. Thank you all so much.
Chills. Thank you so much, Kay. And for using, the Greek words that I started with. Makes me feel validated. I appreciate it. Thank you so much for that gorgeous reading. Next, we have Alina Pleskova, who is a poet, editor, and Moscow-born immigrant turned proud Philadelphian. Oh, I miss sharing Philly with you, my love. Her first full-length collection, Tosca, woo, was just published by Deep Vellum in June. You can find her online and in the astral realm, and I will post links in the chat. Please welcome Alina.
Thank you so much, Julia. I'm in my truncated bio era. I swear I have work in places I just like, I gave up trying to talk about it. I'd just rather read you all poems. So I'm a poet of glitchy desire. I feel like that's why Julia, who I also love, invited me to this love themed reading. So to start, I'm going to read a poem called Eris. I understood the assignment. I'm gonna read about one form of desire. Eris. Do I look alive enough out here? Crushed velvet, signaling my intent to be devoured, undone, etc. Whatever else shows veritable effort. I want useless splendor, to be as carried off with rapture as the woman who kissed a Twombly hanging in a gallery later said, "It was a gesture of love. I did not think it out carefully." I want the class wars to start, but everyone's so tired. All these neologisms for disruption and innovation, and still not a soul I know confuses precarity with play. Eros, I've looked for you all over. Our totalitarian state glitched out my libido, and I give over whole afternoons to huffing lavender, hitting up ghoulish senators, browser history littered with herbal elixirs and all the things I should know how to do by now. All around me, women grip the buoys of their autonomy to stay afloat until personhood washes up on the shores of no nation. I stockpile intimacies almost too ephemeral to clock. Strangers act so kind whenever I wear this ridiculous pom-pom hat. And old friends use my name's diminutive, as Julia just did, Alina Chika. And some lovers leave a glass of lemon water by the bed, my body carved with red filigree. Desire doesn't aspire to anything other than itself. I don't miss so-and-so, just being seen in that way, just having an unholy place to rest, set all this down. It is such a joy to read with all these amazing poets. I'm verklempt. I don't want to I don't want to read. I just want to process. So thank you so much for having me. This poem is written after one of my queer poet lodestars, Frank O'Hara. He wrote a poem called Now That I'm in Madrid and Can Think, and I wrote a poem called Now That I'm in Reykjavik and Can Think. Now that I'm in Reykjavik and can think. After the ring road followed wide and serpentine for hours, and now in a lava field watching Joe and Ryan pick crowberries for jam, chattering in the secret dialect a couple takes on after a certain number of years, I think of you, or rather, The Ethical Slut, 2nd edition, chapter 7, Abundance, wherein the authors lay out their argument against a starvation economy approach to love, how it's not this finite resource, so shake off your cultural programming and the desire to possess. Instead, get better at scheduling. Every non-monogamous person knows this joke. And art I can't execute with any finesse, and that's partly why I'm here without you or any of the others, though one of your curls held fast this whole way, lifted off and landed here in the cushioned moss, which grows so slowly with an idea of order I totally admire but cannot fathom. Here, as home, as anywhere, I'm a laylapse in running nylons, roaming from mouth to mouth, secrets left intact in the babble before I return to mortal with wholesome hemline, then the harbor to gape dumb at the midnight sunset and wonder if one can bore into another with such precision that the hunger is perfect and all you sense, even in summer, these long stretches with no darkness as a comfort to settle you, so every big idea dilutes into a buoyant postcard signed yours. sending love from this smoky cove, flush with episodic arguments in favor of constant motion, each gorgeous detail, the only of its kind, and the mind's dazed shudder, relentless to capture this sublimity, this proof we should be tender, given our undoing drifts in just the same. As muscle memory is made stubborn, so it can reprogram, like the trick where I pinch longing mid-shudder, save it for another time, get the shower good and scalding, head out divine and untethered into the endless day. Yeah, the sun sets at midnight in Iceland certain times of year, and it's really trippy. It throws off your whole sense of time and makes you feel like you're in love with people that you might not be in love with. So here's a deviation. As I was finishing this book, it has a lot to do with glitchy desire and like sexual ennui and dissatisfaction, whatever. I fell in love, you guys. And this poem snuck its way in there. Shout out to my partner who's in another room in the house. So like there's one true love poem in this book. And it's called Elusive Black Hole Pair, because I can't write a normal love poem. Elusive Black Hole Pair. Such a time to be alive. What comes after the ever-accelerating failure of the American experiment hangs in the arid horizon beyond you, snipping basil with beatific focus. Whenever I say, let's, you say, when? I mean it. This thing about the urge to go on, your kinetic way is only to blame. I'm no longer terrified of vastness. My love, let's abscond. Find some galaxy, some town, some meadow in which to become stranger and stranger. And just to close this out, I'm going to read a draft of a poem, which I never do, but I feel safe with you all. It's written after a Fanny Howe poem that has, the title is like the first line of the poem. It's called, I won't be able to write from the grave, so let me tell you what I love. What a line. Heavy reverb. The last word, when Sarah makes it, and which contains chartreuse, which I love too, for the story behind its scarcity. The French monks who have made it for over a century refuse to sell out and share the recipe with anyone else or increase production to meet demand for it. Only 2 monks know its precise formulation of 140 different herbs, and those monks never travel together, just in case. But where was I? I love rose hip tea, shapovnik, Julia knows. Morning doves, art of enormous scale, wall-sized, room-sized, life-sized, etc. The reverie of walking in fog, a traveling cloud banya, slowing time through whatever means are at hand, the ambient soundscape of women getting ready, my copied key turning smoothly in your door one day and since, as if answering my long-held suspicion of existing alongside as yes, with enough clearance, and this awareness I count too as love. Thank you so much.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Alinachka. And I can now say it. I was, as I wrote in the chat, trying to elevate, Alina, but it's always Alinachka. That was gorgeous. Thank you so much. And thank you for bringing out a draft. That's amazing. And our final, and certainly not least, reader is T. de Los Reyes, who is a Filipino poet, designer, and author of the chapbook Woman and Yet to Be and Yet Held, which is forthcoming from Bull City Press in February 2024. And you can already pre-order it. So get on it now because it's amazing. And Bull City Press is amazing. Her poems have appeared in Birdcoat Quarterly, Hobart, After Dark, Pleiades, and Split Lip magazine, among others. She is the designer for Naura's journal. I might be mispronouncing that, but she can correct me. And she lives in Manila. Welcome, T. Thank you for being with us. It must be late for you.
Hi, actually it's morning here, so good morning from Manila. I'm very honored and grateful to be here amongst good company. I'm going to be reading from my upcoming chapbook, And Yet Held. Yeah, this is a book of love poems, and I feel like writing about love is almost feels like digging for gifts inside wounds. So I think I've always been a soft person living in a hard world, and allowing myself to be vulnerable actually opens me up to tenderness. So this book is born out of that practice. This first poem is called Old Fractures. Woke up to the sound of church bells from a few blocks away. Your arms wrapped around me like a cocoon I am loath to part with. What is sacred? I asked you once, quite determined to not get anywhere near it, afraid of ruining and being ruined. This body you're holding, a broken cup you let your lips touch over and over. The faint toll a steady rhythm as I put my ear against your chest. I nestle closer, and from the distance I can hear myself, the lone ringer pulling the rough rope, proclaiming, "Good morning, I love you, good morning." I remember prayers you gave me. One as the sun rises, "I am not going to die today." One for the blooming moon, "I am grateful to be alive." If I am quite incoherent, please forgive me. My heart has cracked open like a window. Holy, holy, holy. This next one is called Drift Compatible. Loose monsters on Earth, and it's down to the two of us to do something about it. Would you be the left brain or the right? And how prepared are you to finally see what has been living inside my skull? Would you step into the gleaming armor, ready to be soldered together for good or ill? Would you embrace what unfolds in my imagination, and even further still? How far are you willing to go to kill the savage coming to the surface? My knees trembled the way your hands shook the first time you touched my face. I will let you in, but I cannot promise that you will remain the same way you cannot wholly guarantee my safety in the labyrinth inside your head. Here, now, as we roam in each other's memory upon memory, hold fast. I see a golden collar you put around my neck. I see the sputtering bus you get on. I see you burrowing under a blanket. I see myself reading a book. I see you washing the dishes. I see your teeth descending upon my skin. And then we move heavily as a colossal fist through water, trying to save the world. Yes, I have to save it. And I will save it. Because your mouth. This next one is a bit long. It's called Gargantuan. It was a disaster on a gargantuan scale. I fell in love with wonderment and have become as transparent as a bougainvillea leaf. Here, sesame seeds embedded in a cookie. Here, the soft center of a sunflower. Here, the tiniest mole on your earlobe you didn't even know existed until I kissed it. I have nothing to offer the world. Meanwhile, moon crescents indent my pillow, and outside an old man with no teeth is selling pineapples. Who knows if it's a pilgrimage of distance or years before I finally get to myself? Who else have I allowed to hear the ridiculous and faulty pendulum in my chest, forming a rhythm of shit, 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 shit? We carry within us everywhere we have ever been, our bodies housing cities, housing bodies. I once stood breathless before a pagoda, face to face with what I can no longer deny. When I said I love delirium, I meant your eyes. A cloud is a wound in an otherwise empty sky. What if our memories have expiration dates and all the things I feel are tickets flying around in a lottery machine? My childhood is a city where tenderness was frowned upon, yet you are now holding my body, whose shape is exactly what I needed to be. I read the dregs at the bottom of my mug as if portents, as if my ancestors' faces, as if pieces of Pangea torn apart by the earth's fissures. I call you my beloved in all the languages residing in my throat, your name an ululation in every lifetime we will ever be in. What is the light if not half of your colors still turned up as you walk out the door? And wasn't it an occasion to touch? If they cut me open, they will find words etched deeply on my bones. Brown, awake, aurora, woman wonderstruck at being found whole after the wreckage. Ah, self, thank you for not further collapsing into a heap after the untimely discovery of the rest of your life. Hasn't it always been what is fatal and without pity? And hasn't it always been about love? To end this small poem called Fist. There are days when I am a fist, and that is all there is. Fingers nestled toward the center. Something frail brushes against it accidentally. An eyelash perhaps, or breath from your lips saying open, open. I hesitate knowing nothing is there to surprise, no pearl hidden among the days. Uncurling, I show you my naked palm. Look, you say in delight, placing a small kiss. Thank you.
Thank you so much. What gorgeous, gorgeous readings. Moved, blown away. Thank you all. Please order the books by these poets. And now we have time for a short discussion to make us feel like we're all in a room and not just boxes on a screen, although the boxes, are delightful. You get used to them a little. So I'm going to unmute all of our readers. And if you have a question, you can feel free to type it in the chat, or you can raise your hand and I'll unmute you and you can ask so we can hear your voice. And while you're thinking of your questions, oh, there's already a question. I won't see. I'll just let our audience ask. It's more important. Go ahead. I offered to unmute you. There we go.
Thank you so much. By the way, I have a feeling any question you're going to ask is going to be so much better than mine. But maybe because I've been listening so intently to all of you read these really stellar poems that have all the different shades of love, right? Like there's not just one shade of love, and they have humor in there and sorrow in there and all of that. But listening to all of you, it feels like the love poems beget more love. So asking all of you who I admire all of your work, and I've read a variety of it that delves in a lot of other subjects. Do you find when you're writing love poems, you want to write more love poems? Does love beget more love?
Who wants to start? Anyone want to take it on? Does love beget more love?
I'll jump into the silence. For me, not usually. But when I was last year, I had to write some poems for a couple weddings, and I found that to be sort of really or over the past couple years, and I found that to be surprisingly fun. I didn't think I was going to enjoy it, I did kind of, mostly because as I think it's partially because as a writer, you're often trying to anticipate what an audience is thinking or expecting, or what will make sense to them. And when you're writing an epithalamium, you actually know a lot about what the audience is expecting, or what they're anticipating, what they think is appropriate, or you might even know the names of people in the room. And I found like that felt like kind of a strange gift that isn't, where you just have so much knowledge that you don't have when you're normally writing a poem. A lot of times I'm writing a poem and have no idea where it's going to land or who's going to end up there. So those poems, so it wasn't necessarily love poems generating more love poems, but I did write a bunch of those wedding poems. And most of them were not ready, or either not ready or not appropriate for the occasions in which they were written for. So I had to write a lot of them to get a couple that I could use.
Yeah, I'll jump in. I wouldn't say love begets love for me either. I would say, I guess love happens, with the exception of Father Weaver. I don't think I've ever sat down with the intention of writing a love poem. I think I have other, intentions and distractions going on, and I veer into love often without really understanding it or realizing it. And I think that is a lovely surprise, and then when you see all your poems together, you see the threads, and love is definitely one of them. Yeah, so love happens.
For me, I think when writing, I'm trying to stitch together the little moments in my life. And I guess in the stitching together, you get rewarded by epiphanies, I would say. So that's how the love comes in, and joy and delight. So that's the experience for me.
Any other questions from the audience before I ask one? Oh, Melina, go ahead, please.
I'm curious about the prompt that Dr. Dasbach posed, and how people would say, like, are there forms of love that you stray away from in your own writing? And if so, maybe why?
Melina, that was what I was going to ask. So you're so amazing. Thank you. It's as though you're my student. I mean, no one else would know this. I've asked to unmute. Does anyone want to, what love poems you stray away from? Are there kinds of love you stray away from? Maybe veer into very unwillingly?
I think I really liked your prompt because I've been trying to write more platonic kinds of love, and like I'm writing a series of essays about friendship and how friendships can feel romantic, and I know there's think pieces out there about that, but yeah, and how they can, I don't know, if you're in a kind of, I don't know, I guess I think of our parents as like our first gods, they kind of are, and so the lover, for whatever reason, can trigger our first wound, our parental wounds, and I don't know, friendships can also feel that way for me, in a less dangerous way. Yeah, I don't know, I'm thinking about just how I've been healing some of my first wounds through engaging in the practices of a family with my friends, and that to me is I think there's an opportunity for a richer conversation around the chosen family than just the language chosen family. It has, I don't know, it has become a little cheap to me. So yeah, that's why I've been writing about that, but very reluctantly, because again, I don't have a lot of language for it yet.
Yeah, seconding that actually. Well, formative poets for me have been the New York School poets who all like wrote about their friends and each other. And it's actually hard to parse who was lovers and who was friends. And like those boundaries seem very slippery. But there are not a lot of templates that I can think of how to render friendship, love in a poem in a way that doesn't feel like what's the word I'm looking for? Not like insider baseball, but like a conversation that you are not part of, because like, you know, something about like romantic love is recognizable to people, and they can like overlay their own, you know, experiences, but friendship just, I don't know. It's a fun challenge in poetry that I'm always trying to crack. So I agree with you, Kay.
I think for me, it comes from intensity. Like that's why I wanted to write this prompt for you, is because these other kinds of love have kind of intense ups and downs and, you know, call for a kind of intensity, whereas friendship in its stasis and its stability challenges us. Like, how do we render it as intense as it can be on the page, I guess. Yeah. Any other finishing points? Yeah.
I don't know if there's one that one of the four types of love that I necessarily stray from or avoid. I had to spend a second thinking. I'm like, no, I got one for several for each of those categories. But the one, what's the one? The love for humankind or something. That one sort of depends on what day it is, because I do have ones that kind of love humanity, but then there are other days where I'm like, nope, not at all. And so on those days, maybe that one would be the one that I'm veering from.
And then I saw a question that another young writer asked about, how would you begin the process of writing? So one of kind of the tools I gave is listing objects. Are there any other ideas that you would give young writers for beginning a poem of a difficult kind of love, or a love, you know, they're unsure of, or any poem really?
I often, this is very, simple and obvious, but I often start my writing sessions with reading. So, there are several poets who are just really generative for me. And I'm reading a book and I get to a poem and it just sparks something and I start thinking of something. And then I have my journal right there and I kind of go from there. And sometimes, the poems begin as simple little reflections or journal entries, and then that becomes more. And then some days I don't get a whole poem. Many days I actually don't get a whole poem, but if I'm engaging with language on some level, then I'll have fragments or something, I tell my students too, like, paying attention to language when you're out in the world, even like eavesdropping on conversations, kind of engagement with language, listening to how people talk. So yeah, I just say try different things.
Yeah, for myself, I actually keep these little notebooks where I write down like fragments that I find somewhere else, and I call my notebook found language. And usually, like I try to read or dip into them when I'm feeling at a loss. Um, and also, I remember this something Victoria Chang said before. She talked of writing as an act of coming out of silence, out of your body, and emerging into language. And she talks about um, seeking whatever is painful in the body, or also whatever is joyful. And I think that can be a good place to start.
Any other final tips for our young writers in the room?
I think for me that I use when I'm stuck is it's just I get my body into a relaxed state and I ask myself what I'm most unwilling to feel. And that's usually the thing that wants the most attention. And that's always a generative prompt. And I ask it more questions, what the feeling wants, if it's loneliness, what does the loneliness want? Or yeah, and then I kind of have it ask me questions too. That's always a very generative, that one's never let me down. But yeah.
Thank you all so much for sharing this love-filled evening, for welcoming Words Together, Worlds Apart back. Let's give a big round of applause to our poets. Thank you all so much. Please come back on October 25th for Haunting. Should be pretty spooky, and also probably full of love, because aren't all poems, they're all our acts of love wherever they veer off to. So thank you all so much. Be well, be safe, and be inspired. Good night, everybody.